Michael Tait is one of the best-known Christian artists over the last 30 years.
Being single is not by choice for me. I spent time last week, speaking of Toby Mac, one of my besties in life, and his wife, and his 5 kids, 3 natural, 2 adopted, but all his kids. And I said, if I have one regret in life, this is deep. I haven't said this much on film, guys, so I appreciate this. One regret in life, I look back, I would probably gotten married earlier, period, and had some kids.
But recent allegations suggest that his life offstage has been anything but Christian.
And Michael Tait has admitted to reckless and destructive behavior, including drug and substance abuse, among other struggles. On June 10th, he issued a heartfelt apology on social media.
I am ashamed of my life choices and actions and make no excuse for them. I will simply call it what God calls it. Sin.
In this video, I'm going to break down the key facts, Tait's confession, and what the implications are for me and you as everyday believers. My name is Sathiya Sam. I'm a men's transformation coach, international speaker, and an author, and I've spent the last 7 years of my life helping men quit pornography addiction. And if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you like it and make sure you subscribe for more content like this. Let's just start with a basic timeline. Michael Tait's been doing his thing for about 29, 30 years in Christian music, first with DC Talk and then with Newsboys for the majority of his career. He's producing albums, he's going on tour, he's doing his thing. But on January 15, 2025, TikToker Azariah Southworth claims that Michael Tait is gay in a video that goes absolutely viral. Now, this thing eventually got taken down. There was a lot of flags, a lot of complaints about it. So the reason this video got taken down was because the claims could not be substantiated. In other words, Azariah didn't have the proof to back up the claim. However, the very next day, January 16th, Tait announces that he's leaving the Newsboys out of the blue. This is right before they're about to go on tour to promote a new album where he is heavily featured. And it created such a fiasco with the group that they had to re-record the songs with a different lead singer and try to get the music out and then try to, sell tickets to the tour. And the whole thing was basically a disaster. But the actual issue was, why would Tait suddenly announce he's leaving the Newsboys one day later? Seems like a coincidence, but as we're about to learn, it was anything but. So things are relatively quiet for a few months, and then on June 4th, 2025, the Royce Report by Julie Royce details cases of sexual assault, grooming, and substance abuse dating all the way back to 2004. And since then, all hell has broken loose for Michael Tait, Newsboys, and CCM as we know it.
Last night, our hearts were shattered when we read the news alleging drug abuse and inappropriate actions by our former lead singer, Michael Tait. While Michael has not addressed these allegations, we are devastated even by the implications. First and foremost, our hearts are with the victims who have bravely shared their stories. If you're a victim, we urge you to come forward. We absolutely do not condone any form of assault. The 4 of us are husbands and fathers. Between the 4 of us, we have 14 children. Our wives and children have made many sacrifices while we have dedicated our lives to playing music together that glorifies God. We are horrified, heartbroken, and angry at this report. In many ways, we feel as if we and our families have been deceived for the last 15 years. When the band left in January, Michael confessed to us and our management that he had been living a double life, but we never imagined that it could have been this bad. Jeff, Jody, Duncan, and Adam.
Now, this initial report by Julie Royce detailed 2 accounts of Michael Tait love bombing 2 different 22-year-old men on 2 different occasions. These young men were part of the touring team or they were musicians, and unfortunately these stories followed the typical grooming pattern that we often see in cases like these. Tait took an interest in the person was starstruck, honored that they got to connect with somebody so talented, famous, and of course, God-fearing. And then eventually casual and normal-looking hangouts start to become a little bit more personal and private. Instead of meeting at a restaurant, they meet back at his mansion. And this is where things start to get really dark because there are multiple accounts now of drugging, over drinking, other kinds of substance abuse taking place. The person passes out, and then Tait makes his advances. And usually, and at least in both cases in the Royce report, the person wakes up in the middle of the night to find out that Tait is there rubbing their genitals or doing something inappropriate with their body while they were knocked out.
Initially, Stephen and Tait met briefly backstage during a pre-concert prayer led by Tait. After the tour ended, Stephen worked as a clerk at a store in Brentwood, a suburb 10 miles south of Nashville. It was there he encountered his childhood idol again 2 months later. This time, Tait gave him his phone number. It started out that we were friends, Stephen said. We went to a movie, he picked me up, then we would usually just play darts at this bar in Nipper's Corner. And that's them. Obviously, he's wanting to stay anonymous right now, so his face is blurred out. Telling the Rose Report, this seemed kind of weird, Stephen said, and then he passed out. When he woke up around 4 a.m., so we don't know how long has passed, how many hours things have been happening to him. He woke up to Tait fondling his genitals and kissing his mouth. Saying that, he went into a freeze response and he didn't know what to do. He tried to pull away multiple times to stop Tait's behavior, but it didn't work.
So this was kind of the first set of allegations. Now, also in this Royce report is a story of grooming plus drug abuse. So this is story number 3 now, with a different 22-year-old that while on tour, Tait would occasionally drink with him regularly, at times too much. So, whatever, no Christian's perfect. Is it really that big of a deal? We can all go down that rabbit hole, but just wait. At 6 a.m. on one particular morning before another tour stop, Tait asked the young man, hey, want to try something, and pulls out a foil full of cocaine. The man was already drunk, and so he declined. He was like, hey, I'm good, I had my fill. He falls asleep, and then he wakes up shortly after to Tait rubbing the top of his pants in you-know-what area. It was just these 3 stories, and they happened, for the most part about 20 years ago. Obviously, justice needs to be served, but the facts are relatively straight, and this is a pretty clean case. But since the first report on June 4th by the Royce Report, 6 more men have accused the Grammy award-winning superstar of sexually harassing them, abusing them, and or drugging them between 2001 and 2009. And 2 of them were minors at the time that the alleged incidents occurred. Now, if we continue with our timeline here, 6 days after the Royce Report was released, Michael Tait issued a confession online. Now remember, originally he was silent. When he quit Newsboys, he did it very quietly. There was no explanation. There was no rhyme or reason. And in his confession, we actually learn a little bit more information on why that was the case. Now, Tait did admit that the claims were largely true. He did mention that, maybe some of the details he would dispute, but at a whole, they were factual. He specifically confessed use of cocaine, alcohol, not just use of, but actually addiction to both of these, and touching men in unwanted sensual ways. And he was bold enough to not downplay what he did, but he did actually call it what it is, which is sin. Now, further on in the confession, Tait goes on to detail that he actually left the Newsboys in January so that he could go get help at a rehab center in Utah, and he's been sober ever since. He was tired of leading a double life, and he was ready to make a change. And Tait ends the confession by stating that while he understands that his behavior would cause people to lose their trust in him, he prays that it wouldn't stop anybody from losing their faith and their trust in Jesus Christ. He then closes with a few verses from Psalm 51, which is King David's psalm that he wrote after he committed adultery with Bathsheba and had her husband Uriah killed in war. But the story doesn't end here. Hey, look, if you care about stories like this and you want honest conversations that help men walk in integrity, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We're not here to gossip. We're here to grow. Okay, so up until now, we just have another famous Christian who is living a double life, who got caught and is finally coming clean. This isn't the first time we've seen this, and it's not the last time either, unfortunately. And I'll give credit where credit is due. I think that his confession was well done. It doesn't make anything better. It doesn't right any of his wrongs. But as far as just criteria that makes a good confession, it was solid. And you never know these days if ChatGPT writes it or how exactly this all comes together. But if we give him the benefit of the doubt that he actually wrote it, or that at least it was reflective of how he truly feels about the situation, the confession was good. And while the story up until this point is really bad, it actually gets worse. The world is shocked to hear about these allegations. We've been paying money to go see these guys perform. We've been buying their music. We've been streaming it. We've been supporting the Newsboys and DC Talk for 3 decades. This is devastating to anybody who has respected them, listened to their music, and obviously has admired Michael Tait, either up close and personal or from afar. But for Nashville, this isn't a shock at all. In fact, this is being called the worst kept secret in Christian music. Apparently, everybody in Christian music in Nashville knew about Tait's double life for decades and did nothing about it. In fact, Corey Asbury, the author of the controversial song Reckless Love, took to TikTok saying that we would be shocked to find out just how many CCM artists are actually living double lives, kind of suggesting that this is really just the tip of the iceberg. And this is the disturbing part, is everybody seemed to know about this in Christian music. Nobody did anything about it. And it took a TikToker to actually stir the pot and get the ball rolling on justice being served to the countless victims whose lives have been permanently damaged by Michael Tait. And if it weren't for this TikToker, people would be buying tickets to his concerts and they'd be streaming his music around the globe. Now, speaking of which, since all of these stories emerged, major platforms like K-Love have pulled all Newsboys music off air, and more recently, Newsboys was actually dropped by their label, likely signaling the end of this group forever. So all of this leaves us with a question. What is it going to take for the body of Christ to walk in biblical holiness? You see, Michael Tait's story has a few harrowing truths that you and I need to face. Number one, and this is scriptural, everything that can be will be shaken. Jesus promised in his word that the dark things will come to light. And Tait's story is evidence of this reality. And while it is easy to point fingers at Tait, it's also important that we are taking care of the dark things within our own lives and within our own hearts, because otherwise those things will come to light and those things will be shaken. And it looks a lot worse when we get caught with our tail between our legs instead of just coming clean with the things that are broken and sinful in our lives. Hey, if this story hit close to home and you've got some things that are hidden in the dark, don't wait for this to blow up. That's why we created Deep Clean Inner Circle, a brotherhood for men who are serious about getting free of sexual sin and walking in integrity. Join us now. We'd love to have you in there. Link is in the description. The second thing we learn here is that broken people have talents. I mean, even scripture says that a man's gift makes room for him. It doesn't say that just because he has a gift means he has the character to back it up. And this is another really sad reminder of that reality. Just because somebody has a platform, just because somebody is super mega gifted and talented, doesn't mean that they have godly character to back it up. We have to be more discerning of the people that we respect and admire from afar. The third thing we can learn here is that when we don't walk the walk, we lead people astray. Tait's victims are going to be affected for the rest of their lives, and countless followers of Jesus are going to be left cynical, hurt, and jaded because of Tait's stupidity and his double life. This is what happens when you prioritize opportunity over discipleship. And the fourth thing we need to accept is that the system is broken. If everyone in Nashville knew what was going on and didn't say something, that's a problem. And here's the crazier part. They know it's a problem and they're not doing anything or saying anything extra. So why do you think that is? Could it be that if they start pointing out other people's sins, then somebody's going to point out theirs? Or could it be that they would lose out on opportunities if they kind of got a bad reputation with the wrong people? You see, this is not just the story of a broken man who did terrible things. This is also the story about an industry that claims the name of Jesus, but isn't willing to uphold his standards. And to be clear, I'm not saying everyone in the music industry is bad. In fact, Mike Donaghy, the lead singer of 10th Avenue North, came out after all these allegations and said, hey, don't write off the industry. There's some good people in it. And I believe him. I'm sure he's right. But what I am saying is that as long as we have a broken industry that is not willing to uphold biblical standards for the people that are public figures and representing Jesus, both to Christians and to the world, we're going to hear more stories. There's going to be more hypocrisy, and the church and Christians alike are going to be left with an absolute mess as a result. Maybe last, and if not the least, just hear this. As somebody who is working regularly with men that are caught up in the kinds of decisions that Michael Tait has made and are trying to clean their lives up, I believe that everybody can be redeemed. I believe everybody can be restored, and that is the gospel. That's what this is about. But I also believe that there's a way to set up our lives and to set up systems and industries and the life that we live here on the earth in a way that's actually conducive to holiness and not to sin. And I think that's the real problem here that's being exposed. So justice needs to be served and wrongs need to be righted. But if you're watching this, I want you to just hear me loud and clear. This is an invitation and a really stark reminder that you and I need to walk in biblical holiness. That's what the Christian life is really about. It's not about the fame and the fortune and all the things that social media is going to try to sell you on. It's about living for Jesus. It's about living a redeemed life and walking in biblical freedom. Now, if you watch this video and you realize, you know what, Sathiya, I do actually have some sexual sin in my life, or I have some sexual brokenness that needs healing, make sure that you check out this video. I guarantee you it will help you take a step closer towards freedom, holiness, and purity that the Bible promises. I'll see you there.